Chapter 138. A dream of golden millet 2. When Chi-Wen regained consciousness again, he didn't open his eyes immediately. Instead, he rolled his eyes and prepared himself before he quietly opened his eyes. Seeing that the bed was still black, Chi-Wen felt a sense of loss. However, he didn't feel disappointed for long. When he saw that the sky was slightly bright, he quickly got up and quietly went out. He originally wanted to return the pot in the middle of the night, but he didn't expect to sleep until dawn. Fortunately, the chef didn't come over so early in the morning to make breakfast for them. Chi-Wen quickly put the pot back in its original position, locked the kitchen door, and returned to the room to continue lying down. He was thinking about how to find his parents. He didn't know where they were now and how far away they were from the orphanage. When going out, one must have money. Chi-Wen searched his bed, but he didn't find a single cent. However, he quickly remembered that there were so many people in the house. He definitely didn't keep his money in the house. There were too many people and too many hands. Chi-Wen vaguely remembered that he should be hiding somewhere outside, but he couldn't remember the specific location. He still had to look for it. When it was almost 10 o'clock, they got up and had breakfast. As usual, breakfast was porridge. Chi-Wen wasn't picky. After finishing it in one gulp, he put down the bowl and ran out. Daodu subconsciously wanted to follow, but seeing that there was still some porridge in the bowl, he couldn't bear to put it down. After he finished the porridge and went out, he couldn't see where Chi-Wen went. Chi-Wen went to his secret base. When he saw the place, he finally remembered where he hid his money. He hid underground in the weeds on the back hill. Chi-Wen followed his memory and dug up the metal can. Then, he looked through it. He put the palm-sized dolls aside and counted his savings. Chi-Wen grew up in the orphanage and only learned to save money in the past 2 years. However, how could such a young child have a way to get money? Some of it was picked up from the corners of the ground, and some of it was the New Year's money that the mother of the orphanage gave him during the New Year. Most of it was coins. There were 1 yuan, 50 cents, 12 cents, and the biggest one was a 5 yuan note. Chi-Wen counted and found that there were only 17 yuan in total. This was a huge sum of money for a child. However, Chi-Wen had to travel thousands of miles to find her parents. This amount of money was simply not enough. The orphanage he was in was located in a county under a 4th-tier city. The place was very remote and was thousands of miles away from the imperial capital. Chi-Wen originally wanted to go to the countryside in the south, but after thinking about it, her mother probably didn't go to Shangha village in this life. Her parents were both from the imperial capital, so her father should be in the imperial capital at this time. Chi-Wen decided to go to the capital to look for them first. If his parents were not in the capital, he could go to Apple Entertainment and wait for Uncle Yuan. Chi-Wen had a direction and then decided to see how to get to the capital. It was impossible for a child like him to go to the imperial capital. He couldn't get on a plane, so it was too risky for him to take a high-speed train and go back and forth with these drugs. Chi-Wen was thinking about how he was going to get to the capital. He buried his belongings and headed to the orphanage. Before they could return to the orphanage, they were blocked by Chi Dakian and 2 other children. Chi-Wen looked at Chi Dakian. He hadn't settled the score with him yet, and he was already coming to find him? Chi Dakian put his hands on his hips. Chi-Wen, did you hide something delicious? Hurry up and hand it over. No, I don't believe it. The director's mother likes you the most. She must have secretly given you candy. Hurry up and hand it over. The director's mother had indeed given Chi-Wen candy in private. Unfortunately, Chi Dakian had seen it. Therefore, he had always remembered this and would come to snatch Chi-Wen's things from time to time. Before he was 7 years old, Chi-Wen had always been bullied. Later on, he became ruthless and hit Chi Dakian's head with a brick. He pressed him down and beat him until he was dead. Chi Dakian was scared of him, and from then on, he avoided him whenever he saw him. In the orphanage, all the children who came to the orphanage before they could remember anything had the same surname as the director's mother. The director's mother's name was Chi Imo. Sometimes they would call her Mommy Imo, and sometimes they would call her Mommy Principal. There were 11 children in the orphanage, and only 3 of them had the surname Chi He, and Chi Dakian were 2 of them. The other one was a girl with cleft lips. She had been quiet since she was young and did not have much of a presence among them. Chi-Wen was the youngest of the 3 who had been taken care of by the director's mother since he was a baby. Therefore, Sometimes the director's mother would protect him. Perhaps it was because of this that Chi Dakian had always disliked him. Even if he was not the youngest in the orphanage, he would always bully him. The current Chi-won was not the same as before. He could not be bullied so easily. Chi-won could still feel the dull pain in his body. He said coldly, "I said I didn't, so I didn't. If you didn't, why did you run so fast? You must have eaten it behind our backs. That's right. If you don't want to hand it over, we'll search you." Therefore, the three children rushed forward, wanting to pin Chi-won on the ground and search his body. Chi-won would not let them succeed. He quickly dodged and hooked one of the children's feet, making him fall forward. Then, he kicked the other child. Ah! Ouch! Chi-won had learned Sanda for several years. Even if he was only a small body now, it was more than enough to deal with them. After Chi-won defeated the two children, he called out to Chi Dakian and beat him up. Chi Dakian wanted to turn over but could not. He could only use his hands to block the punches and cry out in pain. "Stop hitting me! Stop hitting me!" Chi-won turned a deaf ear to him and swore to let him have a taste of his punches. In the end, his hands hurt a little, so he stopped. Chi-won clenched his small fists and said, "If you dare to provoke me again, I'll let you know why the flowers are so red." Chi Dakian covered his face and quickly ran away with his two underlings. When did Chi-won, this little bastard, become so powerful? Yesterday, he was the one who beat him up. Just wait. He will definitely take revenge. Chi-won waited for them to leave before he shook his hands and blew on his little paws. Damn, there was no meat on his hands. His bones hurt when he hit people. Daodu suddenly appeared with a look of admiration. "Chi-won, you're so powerful." Apparently, he had been hiding nearby but did not dare to come out when they were fighting. Chi-won looked at Daodu. It was human nature to seek advantages and avoid disadvantages. He did not have any opinions about Daodu, but he would not get too close to him. Daodu followed Chi-won and asked mysteriously, "Chi-won, shall we continue tonight?" Chi-won said casually, "We'll see." Oh, Chi-won was bored in the orphanage for a while. He felt that he could not just sit around and wait for death. He wanted to go out and see if there was a way to make money. Before winter came, he wanted to see if he could save enough money for travel and living expenses and quickly find someone in Imperial Capital. Chi-won quickly slipped out of the orphanage when no one was paying attention. The orphanage was in a very remote area, but there were residential buildings around it. However, the buildings were very old and had a sense of age. Chi-won saw that passers-by avoided him. He looked down at himself. His clothes were so dirty that he could not see the original color. His hair was also dirty and tangled. He had just washed his hands and feet yesterday, but they were still dark. There was no other way. His skin was very dark now, and he had not washed it clean for many years. His skin had always been dark. They did not have many clothes. Chi-won only had one set of clothes that fit him. The children in the orphanage were all like this. They would wear the same set of clothes for many days before changing. Chi-won thought for a while and observed for a long time. He found an old granny who looked kind and had children at home. He walked up and said pitifully, "Granny, can you give me a set of clothes?" The old granny saw a child who was about the same age as her grandson but had a sallow face and was as thin as a refugee. She said to Chi-won, "Wait a moment. Granny will get it for you." She muttered to herself, "Poor boy." She went into the house. Chi-won waited at the door for a while. The old granny came out with a set of old clothes and 2 steamed buns in her hand. "Here, child." "Thank you, Granny," Chi-won said sweetly. After thanking her again and again, Chi-won found a place to eat the 2 steamed buns. Then, he went to a river and washed his hair. He wiped his body clean and put on the warm old clothes. Compared to the thin and dirty clothes from before, this set of long sleeves and long pants was really very warm. Chi-won washed himself clean and put on the clean clothes. In an instant, he changed from a dirty little beggar to a clean little beggar. He put his hand into his pocket and felt something. He took it out and saw that it was a few 1 and 5 yuan notes. Chi-won thought for a while. The old granny must have put them in. Chapter 139. A Dream of Golden Millet 3. Chi-won strolled around outside and felt a little familiar with this county. In the past, in order to find food and earn money, He used to walk all over this county. Although many years had passed, Chiwen's memories of this county surfaced in his mind when he saw these familiar scenery. He followed behind a few adults and boarded an old bus. The driver and other passengers did not notice anything strange. They thought that this was a passenger's child. They took a few more glances because this child was dark and thin. Chiwen sat in a seat. He remembered that this bus went to the center of the county. He was going to take a look there. After sitting for half an hour, Chiwen followed the others out of the bus and came to a bustling place in the county. He was a child. If he walked alone, it would be easy for bad people to notice him. Therefore, Chiwen walked to a lively place and followed some adults with a calm expression. He saw a public phone at the entrance of a grocery store. His eyes lit up and he quickly ran over. Why would he need to go to the capital alone to find someone? He just needed to let them find him. He looked at the middle-aged woman sitting beside him and took out a yuan from his pocket. "Sister, I want to make a phone call." The middle-aged woman was called sister by a child. She immediately beamed with joy and took the yuan from him. She said amiably, "Go ahead." Seeing that the child was not tall enough, she even brought a stool for him to stand on to make a phone call. "Little guy, why are you alone? Where are your parents?" The middle-aged woman looked around and did not see any adults who seemed to be his parents. She could not help but ask, "My grandmother is buying things in the shop next door." "I'll call my parents," Chiwen said. Then, he dialed a phone number that he had memorized by heart. When the phone rang, Chiwen's heart almost stopped beating. He could get through. "Mom." The moment the call was connected, Chiwen's shout was still stuck in his throat. A rough male voice came over. "Hello, who is this?" Chiwen was stunned for a moment. Then he said, "Hello, I'm looking for Fu Yuan." "Who is it?" "I don't know you." "Wrong number." Beep, beep, beep. Chiwen heard the voice after the phone was hung up. He did not give up and dialed the number again. The moment the call was connected, Chiwen quickly said, "I'm looking for the owner of this number." "What's wrong with you, kid?" "I'm the owner of this phone. I don't know the person you're talking about." The call was hung up again. Chiwen held the phone, looking dejected and disappointed. Wasn't this her mother's phone number in this life? Chiwen made another call. This time, he called Siyu's private number. However, this time, the phone notified him that the number he had dialed was not within the service area. "I can't get through. How could this be?" He wanted to contact them and have them pick him up directly. At this time, he heard two young girls talking about their idols. "Our brother is really amazing. I heard that he's going to change his manager. Brother will definitely be able to develop even better in the future." "Which agent did you change?" "Yuan Xine. Do you understand? That legendary figure. Didn't they say that he's no longer managing newcomers? Why not? Look at what everyone is saying online. I think it's highly likely that ever since Siyu stopped acting, he no longer has any artists under him. Of course, he has to manage our brother. Our brother is so outstanding. In the future, his achievements will definitely be greater than Siyu's." "Yes, Yuan Xine?" Chiwen's eyes lit up. Yes, there was still Uncle Yuan. Chiwen quickly called Yuan Xine. When the call got through and he heard the familiar voice, Chiwen almost cried. "Hello, who is this? Are you Uncle Yuan Xine Yuan?" "I am." The young voice came through. Yuan Xine thought about which familiar junior had called his private number and said in a gentle voice, "Little kid, who are you?" Chiwen said sternly, "Is there anyone around you?" Yuan Xine looked around. He was alone in the large office. Yuan Xine walked to the chair behind the desk and said, "No." Chiwen looked around. When he saw that no one was paying attention to him, he lowered his voice and said, "Uncle Yuan, I'm Siyu's son." Yuan Xine's but had just touched the leather cushion when he heard this. He lost his balance and fell to the floor. He didn't even hold his phone properly. It fell to the floor with a loud thud. When Chiwen heard the commotion, he asked with concern, "Uncle Yuan, are you okay?" Yuan Xine fumbled for his phone and crawled up from under the desk. He grimaced in pain as he sat down on the chair. He saw that his phone was still connected and asked, "Little kid, what did you say?" Had he heard wrongly? Who was it? Siyu's son? Yuan Xine looked at the calendar on the desk. Today wasn't April Fool's Day. Who would be so bored as to play such a joke on him? I'm Yu's son, Yuan Xian repeated. I know it's sudden and you won't believe me, but I'm telling the truth. If you want to know the truth, come and find me. Chiwen told him the address of the orphanage and his name. My name is Chiwen. Chiwen knew that his father and Uncle Yuan didn't know of his existence. However, he knew that Yuan Xian would come to verify it regardless of whether it was true or not. When Uncle Yuan came, he was confident that he would be able to convince him. Do you remember it? Chiwen asked worriedly. When Yuan Xian heard the other party speak with certainty, he went from being very doubtful to being half convinced. Could he really be Yu's son? That couldn't be right. He had been by Yu's side for so many years and had never seen him get close to any woman. However, he didn't follow Yu around the clock. What if? He instinctively remembered the address and said, Little kid, you can't lie. I don't care who taught you to say that. I won't pursue the matter this time, but you can't do it again. When Chiwen heard Yuan Xian's words, he knew that he had remembered it and would definitely come to verify it. Thus, he was relieved. Goodbye, Uncle Yuan. Chiwen hung up the phone and jumped off the stool. He thanked the store manager and skipped away, ready to go back. Now, he just had to wait patiently at the orphanage. On the other hand, Yuan Xian was stunned for a long time when he received this bombshell. He picked up his phone and wanted to call Yu. Before the call went through, Yuan Xian thought about it. He still didn't know whether this was true or not. It didn't seem right to rashly tell Yu about it. He wasn't in the country at the moment. He was busy being a domineering CEO. Therefore, he decided to confirm it first. Yuan Xian couldn't sit still anymore. He brought along 2 tight-lipped bodyguards and hurried to the address he had memorized. When one successfully returned to the orphanage and realized that all the children were standing in the courtyard, the director's loud voice was deafening. Didn't any of you see such a big person go missing? Don't you have eyes? The moment Chiwen appeared, a child with a drooping head saw him and immediately pointed at him. Director, Chiwen is back. The director turned his head and saw Chiwen standing at the door. She walked over angrily and roughly pinched Chiwen's ear. You little rascal, where did you go to fool around? Huh, aren't you afraid of being caught by bad people? Chiwen stood on his tiptoes and tried to cover his ear. I was wrong. I went to the nearby residential area, Chiwen hurriedly explained. The director had noticed that something was wrong when he had been out for a long time, especially when he had not appeared even when it was mealtime. The director was angry and anxious. She did not watch over them strictly, but these children were usually well-behaved. They only played nearby and came back on time when it was mealtime. She did not need to worry about them. She did not expect the usually obedient Chiwen to run off alone for half a day without a trace. The director scolded Chiwen for a long time and finally punished him with no meals for the rest of the day. Finally, she left while cursing. After the adults left, the children who were standing far away walked over and looked at Chiwen in admiration. They were wearing a warm and patchless shirt. Chiwen, where did you get this shirt? Did someone give it to you? Chiwen said, yes. That's great. Chi Dakian also coveted the shirt when he saw it. However, they had just been beaten up by Chiwen, and their bodies were still hurting. The other older children wanted to snatch the shirt, but they were beaten down in a few moves. Chi Dakian saw this from the side and shuddered. He immediately withdrew his restless thoughts. Chiwen's side finally quieted down. Only then did Daodu walk over to Chiwen. Chiwen, you're so awesome. Can you bring me along next time? I want new clothes too. Even if it was an old shirt that others did not want, it was still new to them. Chiwen stuffed a piece of candy into Daodu's mouth. It'll be better in the future. When he reunited with his parents, they would definitely help the orphanage when they saw how poor it was. These children would not have to suffer as much as before. Daodu tasted the sweetness in her mouth and smiled. Chiwen, you're so nice. Chiwen did not say anything. He also put a piece of candy into his mouth. Before he came back, he had basically used all the money in his pocket to buy candy. Since he did not have to go to the capital, he did not have to think of ways to save money. He did not have any close friends in the orphanage. Other than Daodu, everyone else was indifferent. Chiwen touched the candy in his pocket and thought for a while. In the end, he put a piece of candy on each of the children's beds. Perhaps Chi Wen's image yesterday had left a deep impression on the residents nearby. The old grandma organized a few of her old sisters and went door to door to ask for some children's old clothes and extra quilts at home. Then, they sent them all to the orphanage. Now, all of them had new clothes to wear. Because of the large amount of donations, each child was given 2 sets. Chi Wen already had 1 set, so this time, he was only given 1 set. They did not envy Chi Wen anymore. They also had new clothes. Everyone was in high spirits. Chi Wen looked at these children and was infected by their simple happiness. His mood also relaxed a little. Chi Wen sat on the threshold of the orphanage's gate and looked out with his chin in his hand. When would Uncle Yuan come? He wondered if he would be able to see his father. Chapter 140. A dream of golden millet for Yuan Xian had already arrived at the address given by the caller. On the way there, he calmed down his feverish mind. Yuan Xian thought a lot and realized that there were many illogical points. Based on the voice on the other end, the child was probably a few years old. How did he know his private number? Public figures like them always had 2 numbers. One was for work, and the other was for personal use. Only those close to them would know. Therefore, there must be someone behind this child. Yuan Xian came up with a bunch of conspiracy theories. When he arrived at his destination, he did not go to the orphanage immediately. Instead, he stayed at a nearby hotel and used his connections to investigate. That night, the information about the orphanage, especially the child named Chi Wen, came out. The information was very normal. The child was abandoned in the orphanage when he was less than a year old. He was 5 or 6 years old this year and had never left the orphanage. He lived a simple life and had never met any strangers. The only time he went out was on the day of the call. He ran to the center of the county alone. Yuan Xian could not figure out what was going on with this child who had suddenly appeared. In the end, he decided to meet the child personally. Perhaps everything would be answered after meeting him. Therefore, in Chi Wen's anticipation, Yuan Xian appeared at the dilapidated orphanage. The director personally received Yuan Xian and his group. He was in fear and trepidation, and his expression was cautious and nervous. The orphanage had never had a donation inspection team. Moreover, the other party had come so suddenly that he did not inform them in advance. The director did not know how to welcome them. However, he thought that if they could invest in the orphanage, their lives would be better. Therefore, the director said fawningly, "Sir, do you want to see the children?" Chi Wen had just left for a while today and did not wait at the door. He did not expect Yuan Xian to come at this time. Chi Wen dug out all his money and kept it with him. Just as he was walking back, he saw Daodu running over excitedly. "Chi Wen, come back with me quickly. There's a big shot in the orphanage." When Chi Wen heard this, he immediately quickened his pace. He thought happily, "It's finally here." Daodu followed beside Chi Wen and ran quickly with his short legs. "I wonder if the big shot will adopt us?" Daodu vaguely remembered that he once had a home. His heart was filled with hope that he could be adopted and have a new home. Chi Wen didn't say anything. He knew that Daodu would be adopted soon, so his wish had been fulfilled. Chi Wen returned to the orphanage and saw Yuan Xian standing in the courtyard. She felt very close to him and immediately pounced on him, hugging his thigh. "Uncle Yuan." Without any introduction, Yuan Xian knew that this child was the Chi Wen who had called him. Yuan Xian had already seen his photo, but it was far less shocking than seeing it with his own eyes. He knew that this child was thin, but he didn't expect him to be so small. According to the information, he was already 6 years old, but his height was about the same as a 3 or 4-year-old child. His body was so thin that there was no flesh at all. His exposed skin was just skin and bones. Because his body was thin, his head looked relatively large. His large eyes, coupled with his refugee appearance, made him look a little scary. Yuan Xian's body stiffened, and he did not dare to move, nor did he dare to pull the child away. That skinny little black hand, he was afraid that it would break if he pulled. "Chi Wen, what are you doing? Hurry up and let go of Mr. Yuan." Seeing that Chi Wen was so offensive to the guest, the director's face darkened and she hurriedly reprimanded him, afraid that the guest would be angry. Seeing this, Yuan Xian frowned slightly. Then he said with a cold face, "It's okay. I came here to find this child. Can I talk to him alone?" "Yes, of course." The director hesitated and nodded repeatedly. She looked at Chi-won and signaled for him to be sweet with his words. Thus, under the envious gazes of the other children, Chi-won brought Yuan Xian to the room where they slept. From afar, they could hear the director's voice. "Stay here obediently. Don't run around." The orphanage didn't have any place to entertain guests. The canteen was very run down. Chi-won thought about it and brought them back to the dormitory. "Uncle Yuan, please sit." Chi-won asked Yuan Xian to sit beside his bed. Yuan Xian carefully looked at the furnishings in the room. There were densely packed iron frames and beds. There wasn't much space for people to stand. It was cramped and old. Yuan Xian didn't know there was such a rundown orphanage. He had done charity work in the past and had been to many orphanages. However, those orphanages were much better than this one. At least there was a playground in the yard, and the children weren't as skinny as African refugees. Yuan Xian looked at the child. The child's abnormally large eyes were sparkling. It was pure joy for him. Yuan Xian's voice unconsciously became much gentler. He asked Chi-won to sit down and began to talk. "Child, who gave you my phone number? Who taught you to speak like this? Why did you tell Uncle?" Chi-won knew his experience was legendary and ridiculous. If he said it directly, Uncle Yuan wouldn't believe him. Uncle Yuan might even think that his brain was damaged. Thus, Chi-won said, "I am indeed Siu's son. If you don't believe me, I can do a paternity test." Chi-won was confident. No matter how many excuses he came up with, it would be hard for people to believe him. He might as well tell the truth. A paternity test? Although Yuan Xian thought it was ridiculous, it was still a solution. He carefully observed the child's face. Although he was sallow and skinny, he could still see that his bone structure was very good. It was said that beauty was in the bones and not in the skin. This child would definitely grow up to be a handsome man. However, Yuan Xian couldn't find any similarities between his facial features and Siu's. He didn't know if it was an illusion, but he felt that the child's mannerisms were somewhat similar to Siu's. As soon as he had this thought, Yuan Xian couldn't help but pat his own head. He felt that he had been possessed. Chi-won tilted his head and looked at him in confusion. It was as if he didn't understand why he had to pat himself. Yuan Xian said, "I can't make this decision." He felt that it was better to let Siu resolve this matter himself. Although he didn't think it was possible, what if? Chi-won nodded to show that he understood. "Uncle Yuan, can you help me find my mother first?" "You remember your mother?" Yuan Xian was surprised. If his information wasn't wrong, this child had been sent to the orphanage before he could remember anything. How could he know? Could it be that the mastermind had told him? Chi-won nodded and said, "My mother's name is Fuyun Ruwa. She's from the Fu family in the capital." He remembered his mother's background very clearly. Yuan Xian was speechless. If he remembered correctly, Fuyun Ruwa was no longer around. Furthermore, the Fu family had changed their surname to Fong. This incident had caused quite a stir in the capital back then because it involved the popular actress, Fong Shui-ruwa. He knew more than the average person. If this child was really Fuyun Ruwa's child, Yuan Xian controlled himself from showing a sympathetic expression. He couldn't bear to tell the truth, so he said, "I'll have to check it out." Chi-won nodded repeatedly. "Thank you, Uncle Yuan." Yuan Xian rubbed Chi-won's head and didn't say anything. He didn't remember Siu and Fuyun Ruwa having any interactions. However, on second thought, Siu didn't like Fong Shui-ruwa. Perhaps she had a relationship with Fuyun Ruwa before he knew about it. That was why she had such a problem with Fong Shui-ruwa. When Yuan Xian thought about how Siu never hid her opinions about Fong Shui-ruwa, he was even more convinced that he should talk to Siu. After talking to the child, not only did he not get any answers to his doubts, but he also had more doubts. After Yuan Xian left the orphanage, he immediately called Siu. The call went through quickly. A cold and lazy deep voice came through. "How long have we been apart? You can't bear to part with me already?" Yuan Xian snorted. "What are you talking about? I have something important to talk to you about." "Oh, what is it? Tell me honestly. When you were in the country, did you have an indescribable experience with any woman?" Yuan Xian ignored the silence on the other end and dropped a bomb. You seem to have an illegitimate child. I don't care if you're telling the truth or not. Anyway, come over when you have time. Yuan Xian simply told Siyu how the child had come to find him, how he had insisted that he was his son, and all the strange things that had happened. Siyu listened to the last part and became interested. Okay, I'll be there tomorrow. I'll be waiting then. After Yuan Xian and his group left, the orphanage regained its silence. The children were envious and jealous of Chi-Wan for being able to talk to a noble in private. Daodu asked enviously, Chi-Wan, is that noble going to adopt you? That's great. You'll have a good life in the future. Chi-Wan shook his head but didn't explain anything. After the DNA test, his father would definitely take him away, and he wouldn't be in the orphanage anymore. The other children completely isolated Chi-Wan. They were jealous of Chi-Wan's good luck. Chi-Wan didn't care about these childish tricks. He waited patiently for his father's arrival. He knew that his father would definitely come. It was just that the days of waiting were hard to bear. Finally, on the morning of the third day, Yuan Xian appeared at the orphanage again. At the same time, there were a few more people. A tall man in a thin black trench coat and sunglasses stood beside Yuan Xian. Chi-Wan could tell at a glance that he was a little excited. However, this time, he didn't rush over to greet him. The head of the orphanage didn't chase after celebrities, let alone the other children who didn't even watch television. However, the head of the orphanage had seen Siyu's poster outside. However, Siyu had been out of the entertainment industry for many years, and there had been no news of him for many years. Hence, the head of the orphanage only thought that he looked familiar and didn't recognize him. Yuan Xian spoke to the head of the orphanage privately and prepared to take Chi-Wan for a DNA test. He also made up a story to explain to the head of the orphanage that Chi-Wan might be an old friend. After searching for a long time, they finally found this place and wanted to go to the hospital for a DNA test. The head of the orphanage naturally hoped that Chi-Wan's relatives had found them and was very willing to let them do the DNA test. He also hoped that they were really Chi-Wan's relatives. This way, Chi-Wan's life would at least be better than in the orphanage. While Yuan Xian was talking to the head of the orphanage, Siyu stood in front of the obviously stunted child and bent over to observe him. Chi-Wan also looked up at him. After a while, he felt that his neck was sore and said, Dad, can you lower your head a little? Siyu raised his eyebrows. How natural it was for him to call him Dad. He bent over, put his hands on the child's waist, and lifted him up. TSK, he was so light that it was as if he was weightless. The child was so thin that he didn't have much flesh. His palms were all bones. The only thing that could be considered eye-catching was a pair of big black eyes. However, on this sallow and thin face that was sunken, it looked a little strange. So ugly. How could this be his son? Chi-Wan puffed up his face in dissatisfaction. However, even if he puffed up his face, he couldn't puff up the baby fat. He snorted at Siyu. In the past, he was clearly called a little cutie. He had only lost a little weight, but now he was called ugly. Hey, he had a little temper. However, after seeing this face for so long, it was still cute and ugly. While the two of them were glaring at each other, Yuan Xian had already finished talking to the head of the orphanage. He walked over and said to Siyu, Let's go. We've already agreed. Siyu carried the child with one hand and walked out with him. Siyu lowered his head and saw that the child was well-behaved and didn't make a fuss. After he got into the car, he smiled and said, Aren't you afraid that we'll sell you? Chi-Wan wasn't afraid at all. He sat in the car very comfortably. The car drove for more than 3 hours and finally stopped at a hospital in the city. Not long after they entered, there were doctors who specially guided them to the hospital. Siyu had already arranged everything when he came over. He had also brought along a team of doctors he trusted and advanced identification equipment. The identification process, from the sampling to the results, was handled by his people. Furthermore, there were cameras recording the entire process to ensure that the results were correct. No matter how fast the identification process was, it would take at least 2 hours for the results to be out. Siyu saw that it was already noon, so he said that they would go for lunch first. Naturally, they didn't have any objections. The group of them went to a high-end restaurant in the city. Chi-Wan hadn't eaten meat in a long time. When he saw the delicious meat on the table, he swallowed his saliva and reached out with his chopsticks to pick it up. However, he was stopped. Siyu said, "Little guy, those are yours." Chiwen followed Siyu's gaze and saw that they were all light and easy to digest children's meals. Furthermore, the pitiful amount of meat was all shredded meat. Chiwen was speechless. Yuan Xian pitied him. To prevent any misunderstandings, he explained, "You haven't eaten meat in a long time. If you suddenly eat meat, your body won't be able to take it." Given his small stature, he probably didn't even have enough to eat, let alone meat. What a poor child. Chiwen pursed his lips, feeling wronged. However, he knew that this was the truth, so he obediently ate his children's meal. After lunch, they set off for the hospital. Sitting in the car, Chiwen was so sleepy that he was nodding off. He hadn't slept well for the past 2 nights because he had been waiting for Siyu and the rest to arrive. He yawned and climbed onto Siyu's body. He sat in his arms, grabbed his clothes, and snuggled up against him. Then, he fell asleep peacefully. Siyu didn't reject him the entire time. He only held the child firmly with one hand when he was lying on his body. Yuan Xian, who was in the front passenger seat, turned his head and looked at Siyu in astonishment. When he saw that the child had fallen asleep, he asked softly, "Is this really your son?" He had never seen Siyu so patient. It seemed as though Siyu had been very tolerant of this child from the first time they met. Could it be the nature of father and son? Siyu lowered his head and looked at the child. He simply said, "He's fated." Initially, he had only been interested in the child because of what Yuan Xian had said. However, now that he had met the child, he realized that his little bit of patience had been wasted on him. Even though the child looked dirty and ugly, he surprisingly didn't reject Siyu's closeness. When Siyu arrived at the hospital, he had already investigated everything about the child from before he was born. He was well aware that this child wasn't his. However, he still did a paternity test with the child. He didn't find out who had told the child that he was his father. If there was a conspiracy behind his back, he would definitely have tampered with the report. The mastermind had crossed the line by using an innocent child. He definitely wouldn't let him off. When they returned to the hospital, a doctor in a white coat and a mask came over with a paternity test report. "Sir, the results are out." When Yuan Xian saw that Siyu didn't take it, he took it from him. "I'll open it and take a look." Yuan Xian opened the envelope and took out the report. When he saw the results, he realized that they weren't related by blood. He immediately heaved a sigh of relief and said to Siyu, "They aren't related by blood." He knew that Siyu, who was obsessed with cleanliness, couldn't possibly have a child with a woman. Then, he felt that it was a pity. Actually, it would be quite good if it was true. Siyu wasn't young anymore and wasn't married. It would be good to have a son. Siyu took the report and glanced at it. His expression didn't change. It was obvious that he wasn't surprised by the results. At this moment, Chi-Wan, who had been sleeping, suddenly woke up with a start. He lifted his head from Siyu's embrace and rubbed his eyes. When he saw that Siyu was holding a few pieces of paper, he instantly woke up. "The report is out." Chapter 141. A Dream of Golden Millet 5. Chiwen thought to himself, "Do they believe me now?" He looked at the document, but from his angle, he couldn't see what was written on it. "The results are out," Siyu replied and told him the results. "We are not related by blood." "What?" Chi-Wan, who had just been happy, turned to look at Siyu in disbelief. "Impossible." Siyu raised his brows. "How can you be so sure that I'm your father?" Chi-Wan was still in shock and didn't answer Siyu's question. He was in a daze and thought that he had heard wrongly. How could this be? He wasn't his father's child? Then why were the results different when they were tested previously? Could it be that his biological father in both lifetimes was different? Chiwen reached out for the document. "Let me see." Siyu didn't ask this little fellow who hadn't gone to school whether he could understand it or not. He cooperated and passed the document to him. Chi-Wen's eyes widened when he saw the results of the test. The document fell from his hands. Chi-Wen's thoughts were in a mess. How could this be? Why were the two reports different? Chiwon couldn't help but wonder if his father had faked the test because he liked his mother so that he could integrate into the C family. No, that was impossible. Chiwon couldn't face Siyu for a moment. He struggled to get off the ground, wanting to leave Siyu's line of sight. He wanted to be alone and figure out what was going on. However, his little strength was like a mosquito in Siyu's hands. He didn't move an inch and left the hospital with Chi-won in his arms. Yuan Xian heaved a sigh of relief as he walked out with Siyu. Since the matter has come to an end, Siyu, Yuan Xian wanted to say something. But when he saw how the child looked like he had suffered a blow, he understood how much the child in the orphanage yearned to find his biological parents. He cursed the person behind the scenes 1,000 times in his heart. That person was too heartless to actually use such a child. Yuan Xian had always believed that there was someone behind this. He wanted to say that since the results were clear, they should send the child back. However, he couldn't bring himself to say it in front of the child. Chiwon couldn't break free from Siyu's arms. He curled up into a ball and sunk into despair. He had already accepted his past, but now he was being told that the truth he believed it to be false. What was going on? Chiwon was immersed in his own world. By the time he snapped out of it, he was already in the car. Chiwon thought gloomily. Were they going to send him back to the orphanage? Chiwon's expression was gloomy. He thought about the novels he had read after he got his phone and computer. Because of his own experience, he was very interested in novels about transmigration and reincarnation. He had read a few of them, and one of them was about him being reborn in a parallel world. Chiwon felt that he had transmigrated to a parallel world. No, it should be the parallel world where he had his mother. The current situation was what he should have experienced. Chiwon thought of the reason why the two of them were different. It was probably because his mother had been reborn when she was pregnant with him. Perhaps that was why his biological father was different. Later on, she chose to hide her identity. After that, her life went on a different path. In this life, Chiwon had already thought of some possibilities, but he was still unwilling to accept it. Dad, Uncle, can you help me find my mother? Chiwon was now a child with nothing. It was like looking for a needle in a haystack for him to find his mother. With his current abilities, he couldn't find her at all. He could only ask for help. The only people he could ask for help were Siyu and the rest. Chiwon didn't know if they would help him, but there was still hope. Uncle, if you help me find my mother, I will repay you in the future. Siyu had already found out about the child's past, so he naturally knew who his biological mother was. She was no longer around, so he couldn't make another one appear. He patted the child's head and made up a white lie. I'm sorry, we can't find your mother either. Maybe we can find her when you grow up. Chiwon understood the hidden meaning behind his words. With the C family's abilities, how could they not find his mother? Furthermore, he had provided his mother's name. Siyu's words meant that. Chiwon lowered his head as big drops of tears rolled down his cheeks. Chiwon cried extremely sadly. He didn't understand. He had clearly lived a good life, but in the end, he fell asleep. His father was no longer his father, and his mother was no longer around. He didn't want to stay here. Could he still go back? At the thought of being separated from his mother forever, Chiwon couldn't control his emotions. In the end, he cried until he fainted. When Chiwon woke up, he was still a little dizzy. It took him a long time to gather his thoughts. He thought that he had been sent back to the orphanage, but when he looked around, he realized that he was in an unfamiliar environment. It took him a moment to recognize that he was in a hotel suite. Chiwon sat up. After a long time, he got out of bed. He had just opened the door to the room when he heard voices outside. Chiwon heard that they were talking about him. When he heard the word adoption, he was stunned. Outside the room, Siyu and Yuan Xian were discussing the child's arrangements. Yuan Xian originally thought that after the truth was revealed, Siyu would go back. He didn't expect that he would throw another bomb at him. He wanted to adopt this child. Yuan Xian was about to go bald. It wasn't easy for the two of them to part ways, but he still had to worry about him. What was this called? If the head of the C family adopted an unrelated child, it would cause a storm in the C family. Furthermore, if Siyu got married and had a child of his own in the future, Yuan Xian didn't agree, but he couldn't influence Siyu's decision. He could only persuade him earnestly, even if you like this child, Are you sure adopting him is the best for him? Will your family agree? Yuan Xian didn't know where Siyu got this idea from. Although this child was really lovable and pitiful, Siyu didn't think about his own identity. Not to mention whether it would affect his own son in the future, it would be difficult to explain to the Si family. Even if he adopted him, how would the Si family be willing to adopt an orphan who was unrelated to the Si family? It was such a big family business. If he was an unrelated heir, would he be able to hold on to it? Yuan Xian could imagine what would happen to the child. Why don't we find a good family? Furthermore, there were still some doubts about the child's identity. Who was the one who contacted them? They still hadn't found out who it was. It couldn't be that the child dreamed of it, right? If there's no other way, I can adopt him. In any case, he quite liked this child. Siyu said, "This child is to my liking." He had seen many children before, but this child made him want to adopt him. Based on this point alone, Siyu didn't need to investigate the child's abnormality. His instincts wouldn't be wrong. Yuan Xian wanted to persuade him again, but Siyu didn't say much. He sharply noticed movement in the room and turned his head to look. Siyu waved his hand and motioned for him to come over. Chiwen met Siyu's gaze and opened the door to walk out. He still looked depressed. "Are you hungry?" Siyu's voice was gentle. Chiwen lowered his head. "Sorry." He didn't mean to eavesdrop. Siyu didn't mind. "Do you have any ideas?" "What ideas?" Chiwen reacted quickly. His eyes were filled with anticipation. "Uncle, do you really want to adopt me?" Chiwen didn't feel safe in this world. Even though he wasn't Siyu's biological father in this life, he still wanted to be by Siyu's side. "Of course. So what about you? Are you willing to be my son?" Chiwen nodded hurriedly. His tears almost flowed out again. He went forward and hugged Siyu. "I'm willing." He suddenly felt at ease. The uneasiness of returning to this world dissipated. Chiwen thought that if his father didn't want him, he wouldn't have the courage to continue living alone. Seeing this, Yuan Xian didn't say anything else to persuade him. Siyu had already made up his mind. He couldn't persuade him. Forget it. He couldn't be bothered to poke his nose into other people's business. Since Siyu had made this decision, he must have thought of a way to deal with it. After that, Yuan Xian went to the orphanage a few times to settle the adoption procedures for Bang Siyue. He also made use of his connections to send the children from the orphanage to a proper orphanage in the city. This orphanage didn't have any proper procedures. Initially, it was adopted by a kind-hearted person. Since the surrounding residents didn't know about this or didn't pay much attention to it, this orphanage had been around for many years. Yuan Xian saw that the children in the orphanage were all skinny. It was obvious that they hadn't taken good care of them. Chiwen complained to them that the cooks in the orphanage weren't good. Yuan Xian dealt with them one by one. They donated a large sum of money to the orphanage in the city. After observing for a while, they let it go when they saw that they were adapting well. As for Chiwen, other than going back to the orphanage once to say goodbye to the former head of the orphanage and the other children, he followed Siyu back to the Si residence. When he first came to the Si family's main residence, he was warmly welcomed by everyone in the Si family as Siyu's biological son. This time, he stood here again as an adopted son, but most of the people in the Si family were unfamiliar with him and didn't treat him warmly. He had mixed feelings. However, Chiwen wasn't afraid. He believed that even if he wasn't a child of the Si family in this life, he would be able to gain their recognition again. Siyu saw that Sichen wasn't petty at all. He handled things generously and even inherited some of his teachings. He was pleasantly surprised and satisfied. Chiwen successfully entered the Si family's genealogy book and changed his name to Si Chun, the same name he had in his previous life. Soon, Siyu's parents also accepted Chiwen. He could feel that their love for him was no less than in his previous life. He was very satisfied. The attitudes of the three most important people in the Si family naturally influenced the attitudes of the people below them. Chiwen grew up under the care and nurturing of the Si family. When he was 16 years old, he set up his own company and did a few beautiful projects. The scale of the company expanded at a rocket speed. In just a few years, Chiwen became an upstart in the business world that couldn't be ignored. Who didn't praise the younger generation? The collateral branch of the Si family was convinced and completely acknowledged Chiwen's position as the successor. When Chiwon was 18 years old, Siyu told him about his past. In this life, Si-chun personally buried the Chang family and the Fong family, taking revenge for 2 lifetimes. Even if Chiwon didn't rely on the Si family, the company he ran in this life was more than twice the size of the one in his previous life. He wasn't afraid of the Chang family and the Fong family at all. Even the family of Chang Shuep, Ai's fiancé, whom he hated the most, went bankrupt because they had plotted against him many times in his previous life. However, he wasn't as wicked as them. He wouldn't touch unrelated people. He wouldn't be like them, who wouldn't let go of anyone who was close to him. Si-chun saw with his own eyes what happened to those people. They couldn't make a comeback. His heart was relieved, but he missed the other life even more. He often dreamed of it. Chiwon opened his eyes again. He was in a daze for a moment. He dreamed of his mother again. He hoped that his family in the parallel world was still living well. Chiwon looked at the ceiling for a while. After a long time, he got out of bed. Why did the room feel so much higher? Chiwon didn't think too much. He went into the bathroom and prepared to brush his teeth. Then, he looked up and saw a young boy's face in the mirror. He looked like he was 13 or 14 years old. There was still some baby fat on his face. Chiwon looked at the person in the mirror in a daze. He didn't even dare to blink, afraid that it was an illusion. He was reborn again? Or, he was back? Chiwon threw his toothbrush, turned around, and ran out. As he ran too fast, he slipped and almost fell, but it didn't slow him down. Chiwon ran downstairs and saw the person he had dreamed of countless times appear in front of him. Fu Yun was helping to bring out breakfast from the kitchen. When she saw Wenwen acting so rashly, she couldn't help but say, "Why are you running? Aren't you afraid of falling?" Chiwon blinked and blinked again. Then, he rushed forward, hugged Fu Yun, and cried, "Mother, it's Mother." Fu Yun saw that Wenwen's emotions were not right. She quickly patted his back. "What's wrong? Who bullied you? Tell Mother. Mother will help you." "Mother," Wenwen cried. Fu Yun heard the attachment and grievance in his tone, so she quickly coaxed him. "Did you have a nightmare? Don't be afraid. Mother is here." Ever since Wenwen was over 10 years old, he rarely acted coquettishly with her. Fu Yun's heart softened, and she quickly coaxed him. "Good boy, don't be afraid. Mother is here. You're not young anymore, but you're still clinging to Mother like a child who hasn't been weaned off milk." TSK, Siyu heard the commotion and saw her son hugging his wife coquettishly. She grabbed the back of his collar and pulled him back in disdain. Wenwen looked up at Siyu with teary eyes. She still had that look of disdain on her face, so he turned around and hugged Siyu. He was finally back. Siyu saw that her son was suddenly so close to her. She didn't care about her face anymore and patted his tender shoulder. "You're a man. It's just a nightmare. What are you afraid of?" "That's because the dream was too real and too scary," Wenwen thought to himself. Wenwen took a while to control his emotions. Suddenly, his trousers tightened. Wenwen lowered his head to take a look. A 2 to 3-year-old pink dumpling with goat horn braids who looked like Siyu hugged his knees and looked up at him. He heard the pink dumpling say softly, "Big brother, don't cry. Little sister will beat you bad." Wenwen immediately smiled and bent over to hug the girl. Little sister is the best." Chapter 142. 8. After growing up, the social media platform, which had been calm for half a month, stirred up 1,000 waves after a fan posted an edited video. In the video, a little fairy-like child raised a sword and flew through the air. The moment he landed and looked back, he turned into a beautiful young man holding a sword. After a sword dance, he turned into a romantic and elegant chivalrous man. His lips curled into a smile, and his style was peerless. There were only 3 transitions, and the connection was natural and smooth. The video, which was less than a minute long, was forwarded more than 10,000 times and continued to rise in popularity. In the blink of an eye, it was trending. He grew up. He came with the wind and stepped into my heart. My heart melted when he smiled. He lived up to expectations and grew up to be the best. Why are you suddenly tearing up? Tearful +1. Tearful +2. Tearful plus 10,086. Fu Wen could be said to be the only child that the whole world looked forward to when he grew up. It could also be said that he was raised by hundreds of millions of fans. When he was young, he didn't act in many dramas, but every one of them was excellent and was still a classic. He was recognized as the #1 child star. When he was 10 years old, Fu Wen acted as the male lead in a movie and became the youngest actor to win the award. After that, he disappeared from the entertainment industry. Many years later, he suddenly appeared in a Xinxia drama and instantly caused a stir in China. Their child had grown up. After that, Fu Wen began to appear frequently on the big screen. His stage wasn't just in China, but the whole world. He really returned to the peak, and it was only the peak of a mountain. After that, his achievements became higher and higher. Before he was 25 years old, he had won all the awards that CU had won. He perfectly explained what it meant to be better than the master. However, even though he was quite famous internationally, his big stage was still in China. Xizhang was doing a variety show for the selection of a girl group. In order to show his support, he agreed to be the mentor of the last episode of the show. Because of his arrival, the popularity of the show soared several times. Fu Wen was accompanied by the director to his exclusive dressing room. Just as they turned the corner of the corridor, a person suddenly walked out and coincidentally bumped into Fu Wen. The director and assistants first checked to see if Fu Wen had been hit. When the director saw that it was a girl dressed in a girl group's uniform, his face immediately turned stiff. "Why are you so careless? Don't you look at the road when you're walking?" I'm sorry, I didn't do it on purpose." A delicate and timid voice sounded. The delicate and pretty young woman was like a frightened deer. When the others saw her like this, they couldn't bear to scold her no matter how angry they were. The director's voice was not so strict. "Be careful next time." Fu Wen lowered his head and saw that it was Chang Shui, his nemesis whom he had hated for many years. In this life, she did not have a strong background and was no longer the female lead as soon as she debuted. Chang Shui, who was only 18 years old, finally entered the entertainment industry and participated in the most popular girl group selection. Perhaps she did have some luck in the entertainment industry. Without Fu Wen's interference, she still entered the top 3 of the competition. The mother and daughter of the Fong family and the Chang family had disappeared from the public eye. After the Chang family went bankrupt, the family fled the capital in a sorry state. After Fong Shui gave birth to her daughter, she also left. The parents of the Chang family had nothing left. At first, they pushed all the blame onto Fong Shui. Before she could properly go through her confinement period, she was ordered to do this and that and suffered all kinds of torture. Chang Zhuyu drank dispiritedly and could not recover from this setback. Later, Chang Zhuyu suddenly came to his senses when he heard his daughter's tender cries. However, there were too many people near the capital who kicked him when he was down. They moved again and finally settled down in a remote city in the south. However, it was impossible for them to live a life of luxury like before. Father Chang's health was not good, and Mother Chang was always complaining and wishful thinking of going back to the old days. Fong Shui also went out to work. Not long after, the boss of the place where she worked took a liking to her. In order to live a better life, she resolutely divorced and became an old man's mistress. Chang Zhuyu was greatly affected and could not recover from this setback. He either smoked or drank. Mother Chang cried, and in order to not starve to death, she could only rely on garbage collection to survive. The family lived in a dilapidated village in the city for more than 10 years. Chang Shui grew up in such an environment. She lived in a dilapidated house and had endless chores to do every day. Occasionally, she would be scolded and beaten by her father and grandmother. She always felt that she should not live such a life and wanted to be outstanding. Her only advantage was that she had a pretty face, so she plunged headfirst into the entertainment industry. After Fu Wen found out that Chang Shui was also in the show, he hesitated whether he should make a move. However, after some consideration, he realized that there was a huge difference between their statuses. If he paid attention to her, he would be giving her face. He did not want to have any black marks on his reputation because of her. Therefore, he decided not to do anything for the time being. He was only here to be a judge for the sake of his company. Originally, He thought that if she did not provoke him, he would not do anything on purpose. However, he did not expect that she would bump into him as soon as he arrived at the studio. Fu Wen thought that she must be very confident in herself to use such a despicable method to attract his attention. Fu Wen looked away and walked past her. He said to the director, "Uncle, I'm only here to be a judge. I don't want to be disturbed by random people. Also, if my record of 0 scandals is broken here, my Uncle Yuan will have to talk to you." How could the director not understand what he meant? He immediately said, "Don't worry. During the recording, I won't let any shady people get close to you." The director knew that Fu Wen's charm and fame were a huge temptation to those who wanted to take the shortcut. Even if they weren't fancied, even if they weren't trying to ride on his popularity, just being in his eyes and being promoted by him would be a step to the sky for these female members who had yet to officially debut. The director understood what had just happened and immediately promised. Chang Shuai wanted to take the opportunity to say a few words to Fu Wen, but the other party did not even look at her. There were also several assistants guarding her tightly, staring at her and not letting her get close. The assistants thought that they had been by President Fu's side all these years and had seen many men and women show off their abilities. If they wanted to get close to President Fu, this female member's methods were the lowest, so they could not be careless. President Fu's integrity depended on them. Nothing happened during the live stream of the finals. Even the host was on guard. Before Chang Shuai could say anything related to Fu Wen, he stopped her from saying anything and naturally moved on to the next person. However, this Chang Shuai obviously did not give up because of this. She got 5th place in the finals, falling from 2nd place. In the end, she still tried to pull Fu Wen down in public. She felt very wronged in her words. Her ranking should not have been so low. The moment this trending topic appeared, it poked a hornet's nest. A group of mother, father, and sibling fans who were protective of their child mocked her to the bottom of the mud. How dare any Tom, Dick, and Harry try to scam their child? Did they ask for their opinion? It was not like they did not have eyes to watch the finals. The people who were ranked at the bottom had performed very amazingly in the finals. It was normal for their rankings to rise. If they did not rise, they would suspect that there was a conspiracy. They were not blind. This was more than just a scam. She was simply not afraid of death. She had crossed Mount Everest to scam their child. Under the continuous manipulation of Chang Shuai and her brainless fans, the stars were furious. They directly slapped her into the dust and never let her rise again. Fu Wen's fans had a unified name: Stars. Firstly, it was because Cuy's fans were called Moon, and Fu Yun's fans were called Clouds. As their son, Fu Wen's fans voted to become stars. The sky was full of stars that would never die out. Apple Entertainment, who had wanted to sign the top 5 to form a girl group, directly hid Chang Shuai. After finding out about her background, they cut the Gordian knot and banned her completely. From then on, she disappeared. The 6th female member took the opportunity to fill in the gaps. The others were overjoyed. They felt that this was how it should be. Otherwise, if Chang Shuai was still around, this girl group would be ruined. Fu Wen, who had not given any hints, was speechless. He suspected that he had won the script in this lifetime. Chapter 143. Fu Yun Ruo. Mom, it's the weekend tomorrow. Let's go to the amusement park. Fu Yun Ruo hugged her mother's neck and said coquettishly, "You're really getting younger and younger. Are you 3 years old this year?" Mr. Fu pulled a long face. Fu Yunruo ignored Father Fu. Her voice was as sweet as sugar. "Mom," Mrs. Fu could not stand her daughter's coquettishness. Go, go, go. Let's go together tomorrow." After getting a clear answer, Fu Yunruo looked at Mr. Fu and smiled proudly. Mr. Fu snorted and flicked the newspaper in his hand. "Just let her be. Let's see what she's become. Don't worry about your father. He's just stubborn. Actually, he's very happy," Mrs. Fu said dotingly. Ever since Fu Yunruo fell seriously ill half a year ago, they were scared out of their wits. The 2 of them, as well as the 4 of them, had been taking care of Fu Yunruo almost 24 hours a day, exhausting all their time and energy. It took them half a year to bring her back. This also made them realize that they had neglected their daughter because they valued their work too much in the past. After that, they reduced their working hours and were not as hardworking as before. Perhaps it was because they were older that they paid more attention to their family. Perhaps it was because she felt her parents' intention to compensate her that their daughter, who did not like to act coquettishly with them, gradually became lively. After carefully approaching them time and time again and realizing their indulgence, she began to have no scruples and really became a delicate girl. Although Mr. Fu said that he disliked Fu Yunruo, he actually enjoyed his daughter's coquettishness and had a little temper. Early the next morning, Fu Yunruo had not woken up when someone knocked on the door. Yun, wake up. Fu Yunruo turned around and wanted to laze in bed, but she heard someone outside the door. Didn't you say that you were going to the amusement park today? The amusement park. Fu Yunruo was instantly jolted awake. She narrowed her eyes and got up from the bed. I'm up. Fu Yunruo quickly brushed her teeth and washed her face. She tied her hair into a bun and came out in casual clothes. Mr. Fu said, You lazy brat. You still said that you're going to play? Fu Yun made a face at Father Fu, then sat at the dining table and started eating breakfast. I'm not late, Humph. Look, you can't even talk about it now. Stop talking, Mrs. Fu said helplessly. Mr. and Mrs. Fu also sat at the dining table and began to eat breakfast. They had also changed into loose casual clothes and were ready to go out. After breakfast, the family set off for the amusement park. The amusement park was very lively. Most of the people there were adults with children in their teens, or young men and women. It was rare to see parents like Mr. and Mrs. Fu bringing their children out to play. Fu Yun did not mind at all. She held her mother's left hand and her father's right hand. She looked around excitedly. The amusement park was so lively. If Fu Yun saw a project that she was interested in, she would go and try it out. Some projects were more exciting, but Mr. and Mrs. Fu were old and could not take the excitement, so they watched her play by the side. Father Fu had a camera around his neck, and he took photos of Fu Yun and Mother Fu from time to time. Mr. and Mrs. Fu would join in on some of the more casual activities. The Yun family played at the amusement park for a day, but they did not finish all the projects. However, Fu Yun was satisfied. She had already played all the projects she wanted to play. They had a big meal outside and quickly fell asleep when they returned home. The next day, they did not go too far away. Instead, they had a picnic in a nearby park. Their days were ordinary but rich. Not long after, her grandparents, who lived in the countryside, called and said that they would be coming over. They would bring Fu Yun's favorite sweet corn and fresh peanuts. Fu Yun was extremely happy. If her grandparents had not said that they could hitch a ride into the city, she would have gone to the countryside personally. Every time her grandparents entered the city, they would bring big bags of all kinds of agricultural products and pickled products. They could eat them for a month. Grandpa Fu and Grandma Fu were in their early 70s, but their bodies were still very healthy. They spoke with full energy and walked as if they were flying. Fu Yun once again enjoyed the love of her grandparents. They fed her all kinds of delicious meals every day. She drove her grandparents around to play every day. Father and Mother Fu, who were still at work, were jealous. Once her grandparents came, their daughter forgot about her parents. Grandma Fu wanted to go to a temple in the city with a lot of incense to return a wish and ask about her granddaughter's marriage fate. They did not worry about anything else. They were only worried about their granddaughter's health and when she would find a partner. Fu Yun felt that she was still a baby and did not want to find a partner at all. However, she heard that the temple there was quite efficacious. She was prepared to pray and make a wish, hoping that the other Fu Yun would also be able to live a comfortable life without worrying about anything. Fu Yun was extremely satisfied. Although these days were not luxurious and she did not come into contact with the upper class, she preferred this kind of life. No one knew that this Fu Yun was not the Fu Yun of the past. She had the memories of another Fu Yun. She remembered that she had woken up in this world when she was feeling unwell and fainted. The Fu Yun of this world looked similar to her and had the same name. When she came over, the original Fu Yun was sick. At that time, she was washed away by the memories of the two worlds. She looked like she had fallen asleep. His curiosity was piqued, and he kept looking at her. He wanted to know when she would open her eyes. Fu Yun, she said unhappily. I was praying. He almost could not hold back his laughter. What kind of wish could take so long? He had not seen this junior for a few years. She had changed a lot. Fu Yun felt that this senior was mocking her again. Although she did not have any evidence, she did not want to talk to him anymore. So, she stood up and said quickly, My grandparents are looking for me. Goodbye. The senior was surprised when he saw her running away without hesitation. He could not help but touch his face. Could it be that his face was no longer charming? She did not even want to talk to him anymore. Fu Yun did not take this incident to heart. After burning some incense, she brought her grandparents to climb the mountain to enjoy the scenery. After that, she went home happily. One night, she dreamed that the original body was living a good life in her previous world. Someone was protecting her wholeheartedly. She was not hurt at all. She even had a son and a daughter. Fu Yun did not feel so uneasy anymore. Since they could not switch back, they might as well live their own lives. She would be filial to her parents and her grandparents. You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.